It's very exciting and and we feel very fortunate to have the next panel of leadership to add a closing tailored to and some great lessons to the end of day one for the Global Ethics Summit. So at this time, please join me in welcoming Stanley Bergman from Schein, the CEO, Richard Davis, CEO for U.S. Bank, and Ann Haley, Board Director for Realogy, and Patrick Quinlan, the CEO for Convercent, moderating today's discussion.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us. The great news about actually coming to the last event of the day, everybody free tickets to Hamilton tonight. So when you leave, just grab those on the way out the door. And actually, everybody's in the front row, too. It's amazing. So I'd like to take a moment to welcome my guests. We have a really incredible panel this evening, very distinguished business professionals. And I think we're going to be able to have a pretty dynamic conversation today about the ethical advantage of leading a company the right way. So with that, I think if we could just go down, do introductions, share a little bit about your business, and then we'll begin the conversation.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. I'm Richard Davis. I'm the CEO of U.S. Bank. We're headquartered in Minneapolis, present across most of the United States, and the fifth largest commercial bank. We're 152 years old, but it seems like we're just a couple of years old when you look at how fast things have been changing. The business of banking is squarely in the center of ethics, and so we're very proud to be recognized as part of this special cohort, and I'm delighted to be with the two of you today. So thank you.
Delighted to be with you as well. I'm Ann Haley. I had a career in consumer products and retail, including 9 years as the CFO of a publicly traded company with no restatements, and retired about 10 years ago, and I serve on public boards, 3 of them and 1 private board right now, including Realogy Holdings, which I'm very proud to be a part of and chair their audit committee, and they're one of the world's most ethical companies.
I'm Stan Bergman. I'm the CEO of Schein. We are the largest provider of products and related services to office-based dentists, veterinarians, and physicians outside of the hospital. Our company is 84 years old, and we service about 1.5 million practitioners throughout the world. It is highly likely that your dentist will know us, your veterinarian will know us, and the office manager of your physician that you consult will know us, but we're just not known to the public. Of course, we're a public company.
Today is this event is the 10th anniversary of the GES, and I do want to take a moment and wish congratulations to the team at Ethisphere. It has been an extraordinary 10 years and the impact that you've had on the business community. And I wanted to share a couple of interesting statistics that I actually happened to look up on the way here. So Facebook is 12 years old. But 10 years ago today, Facebook, literally this month, I was able to find it by the month, had 5.5 million members. 5.5 million members total. Today they have 1 billion. Twitter was actually founded on March 21st, 10 years ago. So we are at 9 years, a couple of weeks, and a few days away from their 10th anniversary. So think about that, the two kind of stalwarts of the social media empire where all of communication seems to come from and where pictures of your grandkids get posted first. Right. That was just 10 years ago. And the reason that I bring that up is when you think about what it means to be an ethical company today and what it meant to be an ethical company 10 years ago, I think that has completely changed, right? 10 years ago, it was don't make sure I'm not on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, make sure that I don't have to do ever the perp walk out the front door, and that was the definition of ethics. And I think, and I think this is an area, Richard, where you can really speak to this. You know, you've got the banking industry that has become bluntly kind of the punching bag of ethics and compliance, and how does the customers get cheated and treated, et cetera. And again, 10 years ago, it was you were trying to manage ethics as almost a PR strategy, right? Whereas today, you're trying to manage at least great companies, and certainly this is an area where U.S. Bank stands apart from, I think, the New York banks. How do you think about ethics as a real integral part of your organization, where you don't want your customers talking to their friends in this medium that didn't exist 10 years ago? You want it to become a DNA of your organization rather than a PR strategy. How has that shift happened? And was there kind of a moment that you realized over the last decade that this just isn't a thing anymore, it has to become real?
You know, and I feel bad because I'm not
Yeah, right,
seeing
like
all of
who are,
so I'm gonna
here,
move
let me, you
around
know
a
what,
little
I'm gonna see if I can just move this thing. They didn't tell me.
bit.
No,
That was
can't
exactly
move
what
it.
I was
That's
headed
all right.
for, but give it a shot.
Do you have a scissors? I can just cut those cords. You don't need those cords.
10 years ago, I would say, when I started as CEO, in fact, it's also when I started, I would say ethics in my mind was for and about the customers. And I realized along the way it's for and about the employees who will then transfer that belief and that remarkable relationship to the customers. That's a very small nuance, but it's really big. And so we started focusing on employee engagement much earlier than we might otherwise. And let me take you back through a story here. Banks are only as good as the economy that they're operating in. When the economy is healthy, banks are saying yes to almost everything people want because they're healthier and we're allowed to say yes. When times are tough, we actually go on defense and start protecting people, even from their own best intentions, because sometimes the world is getting tough and we don't want them to put themselves in harm's way. So we say no more often. So coincident with that 10-year window is we haven't been in an economy that's very robust to be able to prove ourselves. So in the meantime, maybe of all the industries, vilified as we are, we might have visited this topic earlier than most because we had to. Well into the beginning of the downturn, banks were considered the reason for all of the problems, and certainly were many of them. But we decided that we can't really take the industry on. We don't need full-page ads in the New York Times saying how great banks are and how wonderful things big banks are doing. That falls on deaf ears. We went backwards and went micro and said each bank needs to own its own responsibilities better, tell its own story better, and eventually, because time will find that way, the economy and banks doing better jobs will start to create a better relationship and reputation for banking. So Patrick, simply put, instead of worrying about what the customers thought, we thought we'd go back to the employees. We worked deeply on engagement, and we can talk about that later. But engagement is really the path to the ethics and the way you behave and the integrity and authenticity of your message. And when all that comes together, it starts to have the right level of resonance with customers. But you can't go to customers first and get it. You have to go through the employees.
Got it. So Ann, when you retired, this was kind of right, this was a decade ago as many of these changes were happening. And since then you serve on the board of Realogy as well as several other boards. And some of them are actually in the financial space as well. So you have this observation of this. How can you at the board level share with the audience what this transition has been like to go again from ethics as a PR strategy, or maybe more of a check the box, or let's not have these things happen, to really being at the forefront of being part of organizations that want to be great companies for more than just one number?
Yeah, well, what I would say is I've been really fortunate. I've been really careful about the companies that I worked for and about the boards that I joined. So ethics has been a part of all the companies that, whether I worked for them or whether I'm on the board. What I think has changed is the world, and that has impacted companies that aren't ethical more than it has impacted companies that are. But whether it's the distrust that the public has of all our major institutions, government, churches, corporations, or it's the issues with the global financial crisis, which have left many people not only not in as good a position as they were before, but not expecting to be able to live the way they used to live. There's this mistrust and there's these demands on corporations, which means what I see is us go further to make sure that people know that we're ethical and that we act ethically and that we try to make people aware of all the things we do that are ethical. And that's internally, that's with our customers, that's across the board. So I see the external environment has changed hugely, and it's made a difference in what we've had to do to communicate and step up.
Correct. So, Stan, you work at an organization that was a family-founded company where when you started there, Jay, his last name was on the door and on the wall. And so I think that if you could talk about what it's like to be in an organization where the ethics is an incredibly personal thing to this founder. I mean, I know when I think about Convercent, it is literally a deep-seated passion of making sure that we are true to our word. What was that like to come up through an organization where you were working with someone that was literally their personal and family legacy, and how does that get driven through the organization? And how does it change when then that person moves on and somebody else steps in?
It's a very interesting question, Patrick. So, first of all, ethics are a requirement today. Every company has to be ethical. If you're not ethical, you just don't make it, because if you're not ethical, you're going to make a mistake. And mistakes are very expensive these days as it relates to ethics, because that results in lack of compliance, and we all know the story. I think the world today is more about alignment of all the stakeholders that are involved in making an enterprise successful. And if one aligns the needs, the purpose with the various stakeholders, in the end, one serves the shareholders and shareholder value is created. The company I'm involved with always had deep-seated engagement of all the constituents. So in our case, we have 5 constituents. None of them are more important than the other one. They're all very, very important. Each one of them works with the other. It's way beyond ethics. So on the one side, we have our suppliers. And our suppliers, we want to be the best company for them to bring their products to market. We want them to make a lot of money from us. We want them to do very well. Doesn't mean that we don't want the best deal. No, we want the best deal, of course. But we want them to make a lot of money from us. Our customers, the dentists, veterinarians, and physicians of the world, we want them to run excellent practices. We want them to make money in their practice, but we also want them to understand that they have to run ethical practices and they have to provide excellent clinical care. Bringing them together is our team. We want, as Richard said, deep team engagement. We want people to care. And by the way, if you don't have deep team engagement, you won't keep people. And the biggest challenge in any business today, always probably has been, is people. But then we get the money from our investors. And what we say to our investors, we promise you a great return on your investment. However, Henry Schein does not exist for our investors. We say that clearly to Wall Street, have never had an issue with that. We promise a good rate of return, but that's it. But they're just one of the constituents. And the secret sauce, I believe, at Henry Schein, and probably in most successful companies, is society. If you engage your other constituents, the 4 constituents, in trying to make a difference in the world, that in itself will drive value. So, ethics are a given, alignments of interest, engagement of all the constituents is what drives a business today in the year 2016, and I will say it drove Henry's business when he opened the door 84 years ago.
Excellent. I think that concept of alignment makes a lot of sense. Anne, is there anything that you would like to add on to what we just heard across the organizations that you're involved with?
Well, I would completely agree with Stan. I think that on 2 levels. I think that if you really want ethics to be deep in your organization, you have to have alignment of everyone in the organization. It has to go across, it has to go up, it has to go down, it has to be demonstrated to your shareholders. It can't be just something that you say. It is, you have to make it real and tangible, and words that are used a lot, but talk the talk and also walk the walk. So, I completely agree with that alignment. I think that if you aren't ethical, if you don't demonstrate ethics to your shareholders, you won't have shareholders. If you don't demonstrate ethics to employees, you won't be able to get the talent that you need to run your organization. So it has to be a cohesively conceived and executed program. Yeah, not just a program, a culture, a belief in the organization.
So, Richard, I'm going to actually follow on to what Stan said, because I think this alignment thing is very interesting. I was actually sitting here, I have a picture of all my folks over here, and I was looking at your picture, and I was trying to imagine, going back to that early 2009 without creating too much PTSD.
Oh, that's fine.
and
Okay.
Going back to where, literally the whole world is looking at you guys, wondering if you're going to fall over, stand up, were you the best guy in the room, the worst guy in the room? Like it was just an extraordinary time in that spring of 2009. And to talk about, Stan, you were talking about this alignment between these 5 things, and in a business as stable and has the longevity of yours that can think in decades, that's a really interesting concept. And it's easy, as U.S. Bank is Minneapolis-based, it's mid-America, it has this feeling that is very different from the banks here in the city. How did you think about alignment? How did you think about ethics? How did you think about those things? And I'm fascinated by this as a leader in that moment. In February of 2009, when you've got regulators, you've got the Secretary of the Treasury calling you, you've got the President of the United States looking at you, what do you do in that moment? Because that's the fish or cut bait moment, right? That's the hardest moment.
Yeah, so by coincidence today, March 9th, is the 7-year anniversary of the lowest point in the stock market today. And that's probably the place where my mind goes, because I remember how we weren't sure whether it was the beginning or the end of a real, falling off. Here's the deal. This is where, for our company, it moved from customers to employees, because we had to make a decision and decide it and say it, that we are not going to ever talk about the other bank's performance as a measure of ours, ever. Because for us to talk about the other banks had some other issues, they performed more poorly, they did more bad things, that's absolutely, there's no value in that, there's nothing good for that industry. And that's a decision you had to make, because it would have been quite easy to say, look, it wasn't us, we didn't do that, what are you talking about? And my concern, therefore, was, but the employees needed to know. And so we had to take this story to the employees and make sure that they didn't believe that everything that was being said about the industry was something that they were a part of, unless we were. And so the need to become very transparent and open and honest with the employees became job one at that point. Because the employees needed to think that they still worked for a company that had all of the, you need the water. We need water up here. Someone needed water? And there's no water in the entire room, which is, so I'm going to have to do
That is amazing. Thanks.
CPR on you. Does anyone have water? Let's grab it from the back.
Thank you very much, James.
I have water, but I don't want to spread germs. It's good for business.
Well, I thought about that, but even I'm not going to go that
it's
route.
ethics.
There you go. Perfect. All right, we made it.
Let's save him. Are you good?
Yeah, it was like 9 years ago.
When I got married, my pastor, during the ceremony, went into a coughing spasm and had to leave the church and go down into the kitchen while my wife and I kneeled at the altar for literally about 10 minutes. Yeah, it was really quite.
Wow.
So this is not my
And
first.
yet you-
it's not
and
my
yet
first
you
rodeo.
made it.
38 years ago, we're still happily married. That's right. Your vodka's not going to work tonight. It's going to be water. So for us, this low point was actually, it's the perfect moment, right? When times look the darkest, that's when you have to work your way through this. So I just want to beat a drum on this. The employees needed to feel really good about what they did, and they needed to be reminded that what we did was in the best interest of our customers, and that they were acting in good faith to continue to tell the story and to be there for them. But we also had to tell the story on how it meant to say no more often, tell people that we needed to help them get through these difficult times, and be more of a guide and a steward than necessarily a cheerleader on the sideline, completely different role reversal. And we're actually still kind of in that position. So for us, that moment, Patrick, was quite remarkable, and my number one concern was we only exist for the customers, we really, really do. And if we didn't worry about them more than we worried about us at that moment, we should go out of business. And what was happening is the reason there was a crisis because they were all falling away into some places they'd never been. They were losing their deposits, they were losing their loans, they were finding themselves really out of all kinds of investable assets, and we needed to be there to support them. So we had to get stronger at our weakest moment, and I think that might be the point of pride we'll carry all the way through this when one time is looked back on, and we look at when we decided that we really had to be a stand-up company, owned to the core, not just say it, that we're there for our customers and prove it. And that's really what I think got us to this point today.
So it's interesting. I, as a CEO, I also have these different alignments that I try to think about, and investors, et cetera. And one of the things that I add into that mix is I actually think about the families of the employees. Right. And to me, I actually have this circle that I've worked on with a couple of my team members, and they're actually the innermost circle, my innermost audience, because my viewpoint is, as you talked about, Stan, the hardest thing is to keep great people. And so I want them to be the barrier. Why would you ever leave? Why would you ever think of doing anything else? You love your job, right? And going back to, again, that period is you had to not only get the employees to believe, but you had to get, suddenly their family members and their husbands and wives and fathers, you worked at a bank. Right? And so that focus on the audience and making sure that audience drove your ethical viewpoint, that's what you thought about those mornings when you woke up.
Well, right, and we're all victims of our experience. I was a teller for 8 years. going to school at night. And I was not stupid, and I was not unable to understand how it worked, but nobody ever explained anything to me. No one ever talked to me. And I thought every employee in this company deserves to know what's going on. And so we talked up to them through this whole period and explained to them how it's working and what's going on. And maybe some of them didn't stay, but they didn't leave because they were either ashamed or they didn't understand. They had all that information, and that was entirely the most important thing we could have done, because everybody wants to be part of something bigger than themselves. And so we came up with this phrase called, we're dream makers, and we said we're all helping make dreams. And we said in this current moment in time, March 9th of 2009, we said now we're on defense and we're going to protect dreams. We're going to help people keep their dreams because we can't help them make them. And the more recent days we realized we actually don't make dreams, we just enable people to get the dream that they want to accomplish. We're not that important. We're just the best partner they could find. So for us, this was all a matter of getting the employees to feel proud and genuine about what they were doing and know that management was going to have their back all the way through. I'll just say as a sidebar, we've never had any layoffs of any size through this entire last 10 years because we've never overhired and made a mistake and had to let people go. And that's where family members come together. And that's the people at home that say, stay with that company, they've had your back the whole time.
So, Ann, if you could speak to, you serve on the board of several companies right now, so you have that ability to kind of look at best practices. What are the common traits that make good companies great and make ethics a real DNA rather than something that we're trying to be? What are the one or two things that you see as that common thing, moment, feeling, emotion, action, whatever that is between those organizations that you're involved with?
I think it starts with the board and with the CEO. So if you have a CEO that has integrity, people are smart. They understand their leaders. They watch what they say, but most importantly, they watch what they do. So I think the common thing in terms of great ethical companies is you start with the CEO that really believes it and really lives it and really spends time making sure that the organization understands it. And then I think you have a great ethics and compliance program that's not just on a piece of paper. It's something that people live. Your ethics and compliance officer is out with the businesses. They're making the communications with the organization simple and interesting so that they're effective. They're doing surveys to see where we can improve. They're out in the world finding out what best practices are and how they can bring them back and adapt them to their companies and make their companies better and more ethical. So it kind of starts at a global CEO level, but then it has to get driven down in the organization with the support of that CEO by messaging, with a great ethics and compliance program. And all the senior leaders in the company need to be a part of that. They need to be messaging, how important ethics is. And I'm talking about legality, as we all know. I'm talking about ethics and how you treat people and the core decisions that you make. If you have a high performer, but they are abusive to people, do you retain them just because they deliver results? Or do you say, no, that's not acceptable in our culture, and I don't care how much you're selling or how much profit you're producing, you're not a part of our culture. The company can see, the people in the company, our talent, our most important resource, can see how the company handles those situations and knows whether you have ethics or not. So it's up here, but it's down here at every level.
No, I think that's a great point. When a company can see when exceptions are made, we don't want to follow the rules all the times because, again, it's a great performer, et cetera. So, Stan, I saw that you took some notes there, so I wanted to give you the opportunity to jump in.
Everyone wants to be part of something greater than they. I think that's what Richard said. I think that's what any organization is about. That's what leadership is about. Every one of us wants the same thing in life. We want to take care of our families. We want to have a little fun. But we want to be part of something bigger. And so we're all looking for a purpose. And if an organization can create the purpose that is greater than simply to make money, I think everything else falls into place. But it does require, and I think, Anne, you're right, it requires a lot of the walking of the talk stuff. You can't just say we want to have purpose, we want to be ethical. If you have managers that say they want to be ethical, but maybe are not ethical, and ethical is not only as it relates to the laws, but it's how you treat people. So I think Jack Welch, and I'm not going to get this right, had these, and I don't agree with everything Jack Welch said, but he had this thing about good performers, good values. Those are the people you love. Bad performers, bad values, out. And there's those mixes, and the one is the challenge is good performers, bad performers, but not marginally bad performers, not perfect, but really believe in the ethics. And those are the ones you have to work on. So the whole thing is about making sure that in the end you have people that really believe in your ethics, are good performers, and you know what? The organization and the constituents are very smart. If I think of the mistakes I've made in my business career, it always can be tracked to having not moved fast enough with somebody that was a great manager in the sense that understood all of the market issues, but really did not walk the talk. And so if you want an ethical organization, you want a purpose-driven organization, you have to make sure that the leaders can live in a fishbowl. And I say to our people, the President of the United States is up for election every 4 years. We're up for election every single day. And if we're up for election every single day, we better make the performance and the values every single day so that at any moment in time, if there's a snap election, we will win.
That's a great point. Well, I feel extremely honored to be able to ask this panel some questions, but I want to share that with the room. Is there anybody that would like to pose a question? I think we've got some microphones back there. Yes, we do. Are there any questions? Oh, well, then I'm going to be selfish.
Well, we're standing between
We're
cocktails.
between us and cocktail. Well, I'm going to fill it up.
That might have to do something to do with why there's no questions.
So coming back to the point, you shared a story at the beginning, Richard, that that one of the investors inside U.S. Bank Corp is Warren Buffett. And obviously, I think when you look across great organizations, well-run organizations, extraordinarily ethical organizations, that's something that certainly he has invested in and probably saw much earlier than before any of the indexes came out, et cetera. Can you talk about, he's someone who's extraordinarily financially successful, but brings this do it the right way. And in your working with him and his organization, are there moments where the dollars come in front of the ethics, or is it really, can you really run a company the size of yours and putting those? How do you do the 5-year thinking, the further thinking? How do you do that and do it successfully and make sure that you attract those kinds of investors that give you the runway to do it?
I won't speak for Warren, although he's a great investor, but he does kind of embolden this patience that really needs to be present. Patience, which means you believe you're on the right course and you're going to get there and you don't give up. Mm-hmm. And he likes companies where they're sustainable and repeatable and predictable, but that they're the highest level at the starting point, that they're not willing to compromise. So the dollars never come before the ethics, I don't think with him, not with any of us. What I will say, however, is when you take a look at what ethics does in terms of performance, and it's probably a little different for each of our experiences, but in the business I'm in, it's a service business. We're all basically servants, and we're servant leaders if we're leading others. And what that means is we don't really have a product. We don't build it, make it, build it, paint it, move it, design it. We just take care of everybody else's stuff. And so in doing so, as a servant leader, you need to think through what that means in terms of ethics. So it has to go back to the employee again. The employee has to believe that what they're doing makes a difference and is at the highest level of both competence and honesty. And our business is actually easier. I mean, if we were running McDonald's, if you run a food service, I'm not sure how hard you have to make ethics fit into moving hamburgers around. I mean, it's an important role, but it's not as easy. I can talk about it. We're in the business of trust. In the old days, banks used to have the name trust in their word. It was bank and trust. And so we have to be at the highest level. I mean, it's not even a question. It's not even a choice. But I will tell you, you can't ever draw a line between dollars and ethics, because the minute you do that, you're done. You've got to believe in your core that your performance is good because of your ethics. Your dollars are better because of your ethics, not that they are in any case reversed. And so the best thing that I can say to what my two colleagues have offered up, and they're getting to the same point, is ethics is a very difficult conversation, because you don't know what people think that it means when you say it to them. It doesn't have a fine definition. And so one of the things we have to do as leaders is explain to them what we're talking about. And I've had the privilege of once a year, I spend maybe twice a year, go speak to a graduate school at some university on ethics. And I'm happy to do it because we're in the real world. My first question to all the grad students is, how many of you actually think that the employees at WorldCom or Tyco or any of these companies that have fallen into really harm's way, how many of you honestly think, students, that the people are actually just innately dishonest and bad people, the ones that end up becoming part of the problem? And honestly, it doesn't take long for everybody to agree. Nobody really starts out that way. So then the question goes on for the rest of the classes, well, then how do they get here? And it goes back to this point of, where is your line in the sand on anything before it comes up? You need to know what you stand for before the moment of truth. And it's a process that seems, if you're in that room with the CFO, the controller, the CEO, and 4 other people, and you're in the office of finance, and you see them deciding to bake the books, will you or won't you go along? Will you walk out of there and decide, you don't stand up and pontificate, and you probably don't give them a lecture, but when you go back to your desk, do you decide to start looking for another job, or don't you? That's your moment of truth. When somebody decides to go bad, that's going to happen. It's whether or not you're going to react to it. And you can't have to change them, but you can change your circumstances. And so when we have talked about ethics, we need to describe where we have those decisions. I'm often in front of employees saying, I had a very ethical day today. I want to tell you about a decision I had to make. And by giving them examples, they can start to see where you draw your own line and start to know that there is no place and no compromise. Otherwise, we're asking them to understand ethics, and it's like, sure, it sounds good, but ethics can't be, I know it when I see it, or it's only when it's bad. It's got to be good, too. It's got to be the thought process. So my old math teacher would say, show your work, or you don't get credit for the answer. We need to do a lot of that in this business to talk about ethics, because people deserve to know what you're talking about.
That's an interesting point. Stan, can you speak to kind of pick up on that theme, that idea of how do you show your work, not just the answer? Because that is, that's what this whole conference is here about, is so often we focus on the output rather than on the process of how to get there. Right. And so if you can, from the CEO's chair, kind of share how you think about that and how you work on that with your executive team and your board.
So the only word that really counts here is the word trust. We've all used it. And trust, you can't say, tomorrow I want to develop trust. So you come up with a book and hand out a brochure and you say, today we're going to have trust. We have a list of all the things that are important in our company for employees, we call them Team Schein members, to do and live up in mutuality and all that. That's all interesting. I can't even tell you what they are, Jerry. Don't get upset with me. I know we have a brochure. But it's about...
Aren't they the names of the conference rooms or something?
They're all over the place. They're everywhere, all over. The bottom line is, it's really about trust. And you know how trust is built? By little things. Little things. We are in the goldfish bowl. Every executive, every manager. And we are watched. If we do something because we want others to think we're doing it and we don't really believe it, people will figure that out very quickly. People are smart. So it's on all those little decisions. So, I was involved in a decision recently. Everybody wanted to keep somebody because they thought the person was important. So what they were trying to figure out is how they could figure out why this person didn't do something wrong. So I said to them, it was a not-for-profit organization. I said, well, did the person do something wrong or not? I don't want to know how we're going to prove that he didn't do something wrong. And at the end of the day, it's these little things. And when you make those decisions, you're observed all day long. How you treat people, doesn't mean that you can't get a little upset every now and again, but the way you handle situations is what it's all about. And if people trust you, they will trust the organization. And the bottom line is, it may start at the top, but it needs to be everywhere. Everybody has to have trust with each other, and that's not easy. And I think that's the CEO's job. It's not the technical stuff. It's the job of the CEO and the senior management team to build trust, to be DNA carriers of trust.
Excellent. And if you can speak to, sorry.
No, I'm just saying, ask your question, but you have a willing participant. I didn't want to miss it.
Sorry, let's go.
It's probably your brother, but we'll take it either way.
I just wanted to follow up on those comments. And obviously, despite the best of intentions and the best policies and programs, none of the financial institutions or other companies can be guarantors of compliant behavior of all employees and agents globally. And as part of the DOJ's being an effective compliance program requires a program that can both deter and detect misconduct. So I'm wondering if you could shed some light on examples in which your companies have identified detected wrongdoing and have converted that into a teachable moment for your companies to enhance the compliance and the ethics and integrities of your compliance program.
Great. Anne, do you have a...
Yes, I have seen this. A company on which I served on the board. And what that company does is they send out a newsletter, an ethics newsletter all over the world. And they do two things. They have a senior leader on the front page talking about ethics and what ethics means to them. And then they have both hypothetical and real examples later on in that newsletter about, if this happened, how should you handle it? And then there's a discussion about the pluses and the minuses, and then there's an answer. It's called Ask the Ethics person. I forget exactly what it's called, but that's the idea. And then they will also give examples of hotline reporting and say this isn't, they won't use names, of course, but this is an actual situation that occurred, and this is what the investigation was, and this is what happened. Because people need to know, if you want them to speak up, they need to know that they're heard, and that they need to believe that action was taken, and understanding the thought process for the action taken also helps them think about situations and how they would handle it and what they would do. So it's a global communication that happens very regularly, and it's very popular and pretty effective.
It's a really good question because it reflects on how we always look at the negative side of it, and it's easy to find the mistakes, and it's hard to celebrate the good deeds. Mm-hmm. But Amazon came out this morning and was showing videos of their own employees who do theft, and they're showing them to all the other employees to say, we'll catch you if you do this. Mm. Interesting, so that's the negative view. So just if you're thinking about it, don't do it. That's horrible. I'd rather you never thought about it, and I'm not trying to show you that I can catch you. You should create a culture that says you won't even want to do that because you care about the company. You won't want to bring any defame the company or defraud what's happening and what you're working for every day. But I will say that, for instance, our audit committee is brand new, like 2 years ago. Audit committee reviews the ethics line feedback every quarter. What? The audit committee, like they don't have anything else to worry about. They want to know what the ethics line's revealing, what the issues are. We have people that bifurcate what level of leadership was involved, and then the fate of all those decisions, every one of them. And most of them are gone because we don't have a gray area, but we do have areas where the policies aren't clear. And if the gray area is not discoverable at that moment, then we'll go back and fix grays. We're always filling in the blanks. But I will tell you, to celebrate the good is harder on this case than to highlight the bad. And you need to do both, but don't forget to celebrate the good, because it's just easy to say we're going to catch you red-handed if you do it, and so don't. And that's just a really bad way to enter into the idea that we're going to be honest, ethical, and trustworthy. But it's an excellent point, and it's a challenge for sure.
Realogy does the same thing.
Yeah.
The audit committee gets every report to the ethics and compliance hotline,
Right.
and we read them.
You do.
Yeah.
And what the decision was. And
right.
Evaluate management on those decisions.
Exactly.
So to me, it's about not clamping down on people if there's a slight variation, a non-compliance issue. There are so many rules. It's not possible in our country for 19,000 people to comply with every rule every day. What I get upset about personally is if we found out about something and nothing's done about it. In our culture, It's okay. If we've done something wrong, talk. We'll go see the regulator right away. Not a problem. We'll fix it. Mistakes happen. But you've got to fix these things right away. And the entire organization needs to know that transparency is critical. And when we make a mistake, no one really gets into trouble because some of these things are just mistakes.
Yep.
And what we do is we go and we fix them quickly, and we make sure that we put in procedures for these things not to happen again. But in this world, it is not possible to comply with everything in every jurisdiction all the time. And regulators are amazing. If you come to them with issues, they'll be fine. And you just got to go and be you got to be transparent and proactive.
But Stan, let's be clear. I couldn't agree more, because you need to create an environment where mistakes can come up and not be celebrated but not killed on arrival. But you don't mean if somebody were to say there's a violation of human behaviors, supervisors abusing their authority, there's no lesson learned there. There's a good investigation. And here's what's hard. Then that person's let go, as they should be. And you can't tell anyone why. You can't. That's where you go back to Stanley. You have to trust that they figured it out. They know what's going on. If they don't, it's not your place to describe it. You neither look for the credibility or the fanfare with it, nor do you look for the closure. It just happens. And there's nothing worse than a really good employee, a really good one doing something. We had one the other day. A very important person was using their expense account wrong. Not a big deal. Actually, the money was very small. This person's a really good performer. There's 1,000 people that would have said, let's keep him and just reprimand him. But it was really over the line. You just can't do that. And there was no question that he knew he couldn't. He's gone. And not only is he gone, all the employees really don't have any evidence for that. They just wonder, what's wrong with us? Why do we get rid of this wonderful guy? And I feel bad about that, but that's really where you have to take the high road, because there would be a lot of people that could debate whether or not that was that big of a deal. And that's where you show your work, and that's where the board realizes you do have a line. It would go for me too, and you got to say to yourself, if I did that, you guys should fire me. And they start to realize you don't have this negotiability. But transparency and separating that from just performance and execution mistakes, you've got to let those come forward, let them be, and you're right, the earlier they detect, they don't age well when there's a problem.
Just to go along that theme, in our world, we deify entrepreneurship. We call it intrapreneurship, entrepreneurship in a large company. Basically, we say to our managers, you can run your business. And by the way, we break up Henry Schein we're about $11 billion into over 450 small business units. People are given areas to run P&Ls. But we say to people, you can run your P&L the way you want. This is two things you can't mess around with. One is laws, you comply, and the second thing is people. You treat people right. Now, on the expense report, if it's premeditated, there's no debate. Somebody makes a mistake.
No, it wasn't.
It's a different story.
Agreed.
And that's where the gray exists. And the grays are never easy to administer.
That's right.
But we don't tolerate any non-compliance, any violation of the law that's willful, or people that are not, or executives that are not treating people right. Those are just non-negotiable items.
Right on.
So, are there any other questions? So we're coming up on the end of today's conversation, and Stan, I want to turn to you. You've talked about ethical capitalism, and as an entrepreneur, I love the idea of capitalism as a business owner and someone that believes passionately in the people I work with, those ethics. So I understand. I have my own thoughts of what that would mean, but I'd love to understand what you mean by this term that is, in one hand, so synonymous, but in other hand, there is a juxtaposition between them.
I came across this term in 2009. It was a big, hot debate at the World Economic Forum because all of the CEOs of the world, we all felt bad because of the crash. And the bottom line is there are some bad CEOs and there's some bad companies, but by and large, businesses want to be ethical. And it's really, at the end of the day, the free market that creates economic activity and that creates the well-being of all. Of course, you need balances to that. And there is nothing unethical about capitalism per se. It's a bit like Churchill spoke about democracy when he said, democracy is the worst system ever invented, except
for all the others.
Except for all the others. And so we know that 200 years ago or so, I think 80% of the world's population lived in abject poverty. It's the opposite way around. Obviously, the income disparities are a big issue that all of us need to worry about. We have to deal with it. But at the end of the day, you know, it is the free market that really creates wealth and jobs for everybody. There's abuse in everything, and that's why we need government to regulate this. But at the end of the day, I'm a big proponent of the free market. And in 2009, actually, Richard, I was sitting next to Larry Summers, and this, you know, he's, there's lots of challenges. Some people say he did this and wrong at Harvard, all that. And he said, you know, everybody was down. He said to a group of people, he said, don't bet against America. And why? Because America is sets the whole standard for free market.
Right.
This is a country that has been built on the free market. Capitalism. It's been built on immigrants. It's been built on an environment where anybody can create value. And so I'm a big proponent of capitalism in an ethical way.
Ann, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I can't say it better than he said it.
All right.
Are we at the big close?
We are at the big close. The fireworks are about to go off.
I want to add one thing.
All right, let's do it.
Because you guys find this interesting. David Brooks is an author, and he wrote a book called The Road to Character. It's really quite good. But there's only one part in there I really, really loved, and I want to close my thoughts on this because he talks about virtues. And there are resume virtues and eulogy virtues. And it's quite remarkable to think about it. And that's where I think ethics comes back. People don't live their life. And I've gone to so many retirement parties. I have feted people at retirement parties. And we never talk about all the things they did. We always talk about how well they did them. We don't talk about the stuff they moved around. We talk about the people whose lives they touched. And that's really what your life boils down to, at least your professional moment. This is the end of your career. And in eulogies, it becomes even more profound. People talk about the person you were, the way you lived your life, the way you gave and helped and guided and mentored. And so ethics is right there. That's why we have to be careful. The day-to-day stuff is why you have to watch for the mechanics of it and make sure people do the right thing. But if you get them to do the right thing because they know what's right and because they want to do the right thing, now you're talking about life's issues, virtues that really matter. And so we look at resumes and we think, I don't even look at some of the stuff on the resume. I don't care what club you ran and how many GPA wonderful things you did. I really care about the person you are. And in the interview, every one of us, right in the interview, blah, blah, blah on the resume, I want to get to know you. I want to get inside of you and find out what really matters to you and what your life means to you so that that can intersect with our company, you're probably going to get the job. And if it doesn't, good luck somewhere else. But this is the difference. And I think that road to character and that word character has a lot to do with ethics. And that's the kind of thing we want to do. Everyone starts out with a blank palette, ready to be a good person. They're influenced along the way, but they want to find a place where they can live their life honestly and greatly and be part of something really important. That's what this whole process is about. And you guys bringing in, Ethisphere bringing in some light to companies that do it well, give everybody else, and like us a couple of years ago, we weren't one of these companies, gave us something to shoot for and to understand because you showed your work.
Yep. And I think, you know, it's interesting being both a CEO of a company and being inside this space. You know, we spend so much time in our professional life talking about how we can assist and facilitate ethics and compliance and the tactical things and the policies and the et cetera. But really, at the end of the day, it is not a tactic. It's actually, it is as simple as doing the right thing. Right. And I think that it clearly does start with leadership. I think we have an example here of 3 extraordinary leaders that have impacted their own organizations and then many organizations with you, Ann. We thank you very much for coming today, for celebrating Ethisphere's 10th anniversary, and we wish you all the best of luck moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.